Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Talking Yourself Off the Ledge. Today we have Caitlyn on the phone. She's going to be sharing her story with us. I'm actually really excited to hear it because this is actually the first episode of someone that I don't know their story.
Yep, and it's Caitlyn's actually someone really close to me, and after we put out the first video, she actually reached out to me, and there were a few things in my story that she kind of related to, and we just got talking about how the healing process of traumas or whatever you go through. It's good to talk about it. It's good to share it and let it out, and just be able to heal. So I'm really excited to, for you. I'm glad that you reached out and that we're doing this today. So we're glad to have you.
And thank you so much for having me on here. When I saw the first episode, it really did strike a chord, with my emotions and just hearing what you've been through. And then Tim, I did see your video too, and just hearing that everyone has these types of struggles, and just kind of looking at where I am now. I'm 26 years old, and I still feel that childhood trauma that you've gone through, it's still there for me at times where I'm I should be an adult now, and it's still just kind of having that healing process that's definitely been a long time coming. I guess my vision of how I would be as an adult, going through all that, I thought maybe by the time I'm 24 or 25, or even before then, I will have everything figured out, and just kind of realizing that reality is that, no, we're still going to work through this, and we're still going to have to cope with a couple of things that have happened. So, just thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to just dive into it for real, because I feel there's a lot of stuff that I just haven't really spoken about. And I feel because you and I have been close, even when we were younger too. So some of the stuff that you were saying, I know the people in your story, and in a way, people in my story too. And it's just kind of the fact that we were both going through the struggle together. I almost wish I could go back in time and be we can get through it together, and just. But
not
we
feel
were
we're so alone.
Yeah, because it really did feel when you had said you were walking and just realizing that you were completely alone, it made me extremely I was in tears almost at that point, because it was I honestly felt the same around that point in time in my life, and it was just if only I knew what I know now, I guess. So I guess this was starting all of this sort of stems from my childhood. It wasn't necessarily the same as Yvette, but it was that my father emigrated from Ecuador and came to the States, and that's how he met my mom. And so I grew up in the United States, but I grew up in a multicultural type family, and so we did have that sort of cultural differences that we had to overcome and deal with. And just I don't know how well my parents knew each other prior to the marriage. I feel a lot of stuff was sort of kept secret from me in order to try and shelter me, but at the same time I felt I was still really involved in their marriage, and just in a way that a child shouldn't really know certain things that go on within a marriage until they're older and stuff. So it's just
do you think that
very
kind of put you in the middle?
Yeah, it was very much who are you going to side with? If this comes down to even if it got taken to court or stuff like that, who are you going to pick? And it's I didn't want to have to pick between the two of them, because to this day I still love them with all my heart, and that's a really difficult decision to make, especially for someone at the time that was I was put in those positions even as young as 5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was just it's just and I felt extremely guilty, because I guess a lot of the struggles came with my mom and I, because prior to her marrying my father, she married her husband for that and had a son. And so our dynamic growing up was very interesting, because my brother didn't look like me, and he also didn't look like my dad, but we were also living in the same house together. But in a way, my mom wanted to keep it separate. She was very protective over my brother. and like wouldn't really let my dad like raise him the way that like in order to just be like stronger and more confident in yourself. And I've had talks with my brother now, like now that we're all grown up, and we just kind of reconnect and say like, yeah, like we really wish this was how a house was as opposed to what it was. And the dynamic that she had created was that like she had said this to me in my later teens. I'm going to take care of like your brother financially and like support him through college and stuff, and your dad's going to take care of you. But it was like, it felt more like she was always stating like, hey, like anything that you need, like food wise or like clothing wise, that's all going to fall into your dad. Even though I'm your mom, I need you to rely on just your dad for that.
Wow.
And I need to focus on your brother. And like as kids, that was a really difficult dynamic because that's not something that we're capable of really understanding at times when like, if my brother and I just like, you know, got into like a simple like childhood spat, for some reason it would like, my dad would try and like scold my brother or something. And it would just spark this rage in my mom where she would get angry, and then it would be my parents fighting. And I just remember like one moment she just like stopped, the fighting stopped, and they like stormed off angry, and she just kind of like looked at me and said like, you caused this, like you did this on purpose.
Wow.
And it was just like a very like shocking thing where I just felt like I really couldn't show my true emotions for this fear of being the reason for an argument, or being like, if she had said something that made me upset, she would always say like, oh, you're just making that face so that your dad will get mad and like fight against me. And it was just very like, I even asked her as an adult, I was like, why did you blame me for this thing? She was like, well, it was like you were being manipulative. And I asked her, I said, but I was like a child. I would be 5 or 6 years old, and if my brother like did something, or if he like was playing too rough and it hurt me, like how was I capable of thinking like, hey, I'm going to plan this, I'm going to be this manipulative mastermind at 5 years old?
Yeah.
And she just kind of looked at me, she's like, but you were smart for your age. And just like, it's always been sort of like, I feel growing up, it's been that I have always been held to this like higher accountability standard with my mom. And whenever she got angry at my brother, like he would get off quite easily for things. But if it was me, it would be severe to the point of like, she would threaten me quite often. And as a kid, she would also like hit me often, mostly in like spanking, but there were times when it would just be like the sheer rage to the point where like I would, like you would sort of like board yourself up somewhere, like keep yourself scarce, in that living situation, trying to just like avoid the interaction or the uncertainty of, is she going to hit me or not?
Wow.
Like, I think there's like, one example of like, I was a kid and I guess maybe I must have done something wrong, but it was a while ago. And when I got home, it was like my dad had to my mom what I'd done. And I was just like in the bathroom, like showering, and as a kid, and my mom just like yanked me out and just like started like whacking me repeatedly for something that I'd done. And I just didn't realize, like, no one had told me anything that I had done wrong. It was just like out of nowhere, like I was at peace, just like relaxing, doing my own thing. And
In
then
your
suddenly
privacy
just have this
too.
like, yeah, like that was another thing in our household, is there was no privacy. Like I would be like changing, and then like someone would just like open the door. And if I complained about it, they'd be like, well, what are you trying to hide? Like, why are you hiding? You know? And it's like, I'm hiding because I'm scared sometimes, you know? And just, yeah, it just like sparks this sort of like ongoing negativity and ongoing like fear that I had of my mom, and just like feeling like I was really this burden on her.
And there was like
now that
an
I'm old,
obvious separation too. It's like she created this dynamic that it's like, you know, she's with her son, and then your father is with you. And it's I feel like in a household, like it should be all like your
yeah,
unit.
family unit together.
Yeah.
And I feel like so kids really adapt to all different types of situations and scenarios. How do you feel you adapted as a kid to that, and in what way?
I think just like kind of like entering in, I don't know if it's an exaggeration, but kind of like a survival mode of just trying to avoid. I just became very quiet, and like I remember my family always saying like, "Oh, you're always hiding in your room, like you're always stuck in your room," and that was just more of like, I know that if I stay in my room, the likelihood of there being any sort of chance of an argument is like close to none, because it could be anything. Like I almost feel like looking at my mom now, she does have anger issues, and I don't think she's ever sought any help for that. But it could just be like you could be having a normal conversation, and then all of a sudden it just like there would be like a switch that just flips, and suddenly you were the bad guy to her, and she had to like put you in your place for that.
Do you feel like you had to put up some kind of barriers as you got older around your mother with just some of those things that you mentioned? Do you ever feel like you had to, limit some kind of communication or do certain things?
I would definitely. I feel like I've kind of done that now, because honestly, I felt like that I didn't feel the weight off my shoulders of like actually being like my own free person until I like moved out for college.
Wow.
And so I like look back on it, on like all my life up till now. Like I didn't really start building confidence in myself as a person until I was like in college and just trying to like stumble around and essentially find myself. And in that process, like I did feel somewhat guilty because I do have a younger sister that's almost 10 years younger than me. And I didn't visit home as often as I would have liked to see her, because I just wanted to avoid that contact and that confrontation with my mom at all costs. Because even now that I'm an adult, there's still cases where like if she gets on a certain topic, and if I don't go along with what she's saying, or if I try and dispute anything, it could easily just regress back into old habits of her immediately getting angry. And it's like, I don't know, just always felt like a self-destructive type of tactic of just always having this negativity come about just based on like one subject. And I would honestly like ask her in certain situations, like when she would start like cursing or just being like verbally abusive, I just kind of look at her and be like, I'm your kid. Like, I can't believe you're saying this to your kid,
And now did she treat your younger sister the same way?
I'm fairly certain she hasn't, but it's been, because I think it was more severe because there was a dynamic with my brother and I since we were closer in age. So we grew up in that setting together, whereas she's been mainly raised as like, she's not an only child, but like she's been the only child in the household at this point in time, because when she was finally getting into her teens and finally able to catch on to stuff, she's like, I was already moved out for college, and my brother was already in his first marriage as well. So I hope she hasn't had to face too much. I always tell her, like, just call me, and I check up on her, and I try and, like, tell her, especially because she's looking at colleges now. I just told her, I said, if you need a way out, or if you feel like you want to move out, let me know, because I want to be able to support her in that.
How did the dynamic change? How did the dynamic change when she was born? Because if it was kind of that civil war type thing going on in the house when she was born, did it almost break that up, or did it make it worse?
I think things had mellowed down at that point, because my brother had been moved out at that, like around that time, and my mom at that point was just trying to, control me because I was older at that point, and I was heading off to college. So I think the realization that, I'm going to be an adult and be able to make my own decisions without you, she kind of wanted to still hold on to that bit of control a little bit longer. So in a way, like, I guess it was good that I was still there, because I was kind of like a buffer to my sister, and I didn't really see her be like that towards my sister. I think it was just me that had been like the harder criticizing factor. And I think the backstory behind that is that she married my father, and I don't know if they were particularly ready for a marriage. I think it was in like an unplanned pregnancy, but she wanted me to have a father figure. So she kind of like, I don't think she was fully ready to marry him. And I don't know if he was ready as well, but at the time he wasn't documented. And so it just seemed like a better situation for the both of them to get married. But because later on she did say that she like regretted kind of marrying him and just like going through all the struggles. So they didn't really have a good marriage. Like it wasn't one built off of trust. It was very like loud fights a lot, and just, you know, even throwing things, breaking things, and just like she just would almost lump me in that decision process as in like, you're your child's father, you know. And so I think it was more like when it came to that dynamic with my sister was adopted. So it was like, that was, my mom, I think that was like her child more than my father's, even though my father is the adoptive parent on the papers. But my sister now, because my parents are divorced now, so my sister does live with my mom instead of my dad.
So that's interesting that she was adopted. What do you have an idea of, you know, how or why that came about, that she was adopted over them, you know, having a child?
So I think this also like they tried to. So it kind of goes into
trying to fix
like
the marriage,
what ultimately led to their separation was like I think they were trying to save their marriage, or at least bring some brightness back into it, because it got pretty, like the household itself and the dynamic that we had was just like a very negative thing. Like even my father, like he wouldn't get kicked out, but he would like try and take like longer work trips, sort of like avoid interactions with my mom as well. And I just think that they did try for kids after me, but I think my mom wasn't able to have kids anymore, but she still really, really wanted, you know, another child. Like she still is a very motherly person, but it was just,
do you think it's probably just more of the dynamic that her and your dad had, maybe just kind of like that resentment that she had towards him and the bad relationship that she had with him? She kind of put that and turn it on you a little bit. You know, like you said, it's like your father's kid kind of thing. I
don't know. I just feel like she just doesn't recognize her mistakes in that instance. And it's just really like that. I think that really has stunted the healing process for me, is because I feel all this anger because I was just a kid and having to shoulder the blame of like a failed marriage and being a disappointment to my mom, all the while like it should have been her being the parent and guiding me through this process and like helping me, you know, just to grow up and be a stronger person mentally.
So did this I guess, did it affect you in like having friends and being social and I don't know, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely. I was actually quite embarrassed of our dynamic. I think to save face in public, like my parents would act like everything was fine in their marriage. They were legally married until I graduated high school, but they had already been sleeping in separate rooms since I was like 10 years old. And like I would almost be ashamed to bring friends over because my mom, like if she got mad about something, she wouldn't hide it. Like she would just start yelling at that. To me, would just be like, I guess I was ashamed of that. And having my friends, like we grew up in a neighborhood that was considered like upper middle class, even though we weren't upper middle class. And just like, I would always go over to other friends' houses, and it would be so weird to see them like interact normally with their parents. Or like, in my opinion, it was like normal. Like they could not necessarily agree with things that their parents were saying. And then their parent would retaliate by like immediately yelling or like, threatening violence. And that was something that was like,
at what point did you kind of have like an aha moment about it? Was it maybe seeing other friends' parents interact, or when did you kind of notice that like, oh, something's wrong in my house? It doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I think it was middle school, like towards the end of middle school. I went over to a friend's house, and she like was playing, or she was trying to keep her sister out, and her sister was only like 2 years younger. But it was just like the typical like funny, like, you like get out, leave us alone, like we're older. And then they were like joking, and they like kept slamming the door shut, and I was almost like shaking with fear.
Right,
I was
the
like,
wrath is coming.
Yeah, I was like, if I'd done that in my house, like I even told her, she's like, why are you telling me to stop? Like, it's fine. Like, no one cares. And like, then when we were playing, like she had a lock on her door, and she could lock the door. And I thought, like, my mom said that if I ever went and got a lock to my door, she would like remove my door. Wow. And just kind of like having that like another kid my age having that freedom was just so foreign to me. Just not having, like, even if you're playing with someone else, not having that, just like lingering, like looking over your shoulder to make sure, like, is everything okay? Is everything all right?
Right. You probably didn't feel like you had your own safe space,
Yeah. No, I would like do homework, like sometimes even in my closet. And I don't know, I don't know if you remember like how my room was set up. Like it was a relatively big room.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't spend time in the room. I would go into my closet and just kind of like hang out there. So it was like the only point where like if they open up the bedroom door and they see I'm not there, they might think I'm somewhere else. So then they'll have to take the extra time to open up the closet door and see where I'm at.
Wow.
It was just like a really weird setup, and just I always felt like I just didn't have my own privacy. At any point in time, like, dating, absolutely not. I didn't date at all in high school. I couldn't imagine that humiliation.
So when you did go to college and that massive, because that was when you first moved out, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like, that transition from no safe space, no locks on your doors, doing homework in the closet, to all of a sudden you're at college? How far away were you when you went to college?
It really wasn't that far. I was probably only about like 30 minutes. And that was kind of done on purpose by my mom.
But did you live on campus?
Sure. No, I lived next to campus.
Okay, but you
still have your own space.
Yeah, but you had your own place. So yeah. How did that? Yeah. What was that transition like for you?
It was very weird. Like definitely being able to lock. I think it was weird, but I was quick to just like enjoy it. Like locking my door, I just kept locking it all the time. Like whenever someone came in the room, I'm just like, oh, just make sure you close the door on the way out. Like just having that. Like I felt my mood become more elated, and I guess people would be like, oh, like Caitlyn, you look a lot happier, is what some of my peers would say. And that was something that like I just never really noticed, that like, how I looked on the outside was reflecting what I was feeling so much on the inside. And just being able to come home at whatever time and everything. I think the biggest change in my mom, and it was something that really freaked me out, is I was staying home for one weekend, like back at my house that I grew up in. And I came home past like normal curfew, which was like 10 p.m. And she was immediately there as soon as I opened the door, and I could feel like my heart just drop and thinking like, oh no, like here it is, like I've messed up. And she was like, no, it's fine because you're 18, like you're an adult. And it was such a weird thing. Like I sat there and just kept asking her like over and over again, like, are you sure it's okay? Like, do you need to like know? Do I need to tell you everything? Like, what do you need to know? Because I honestly hadn't been doing anything other than like catching up with the old high school friends. But just like the old habit still took time to like go away.
It's interesting how she flipped the switch like that, though.
Really, yeah.
Like you said, flipping a switch. Like at one moment you know, like our whole childhood growing up wasn't like, it wasn't always bad between my mom and I. Like, we have similar interests, we like similar movies, and sometimes we would have movie nights together, just like the two of us. And those times would be wonderful. But then it's that whole, like, you know, she'd flip a switch, and then in the next moment, you're like I literally looked at her one time, and I was like, you almost look like you hate me right now. Like, suddenly I'm not your kid anymore. Like, it was just such a big difference in personality.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into
person.
it, and I'm not a doctor, but it sounds very similar to bipolar disorder, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's ever something that has been discussed or anything, but it, you know, but just in general, I mean, there's plenty of different things, but that's...
The ironic part is, like, she's always like, oh, like, we don't need therapy. Like, no one needs therapy. That doesn't really help. And I think now she is being a therapist. So
that's
good.
I know. At least there's, like, some progress. So, like, I am happy for her in that instance, because I want her overall, like, she's still my mom. Mm-hmm. And I want her to be a happy and healthy person as much as possible, especially with my sister still living under her roof. Like, I think my sister has had a generally, like, happier environment. My mom is remarried now, and I know that sometimes her and her husband have like arguments and such, but I don't think it was to the extent of how bad it got when I was a kid. Because like those arguments, like sometimes my dad would leave, and when my dad would leave, my mom would say like, oh, well, he's not coming back ever again. Oof. You know, and that would be kind of shocking or like really hurt me. And then other times she would say like, oh, well, he can't, you know, eat dinner with us because he's out seeing a girlfriend, and like there wasn't any girlfriend. And so it just kind of like she would just jump to the worst conclusions, and I would be like her confidant in that, because in that way I would see my dad in the same way that she saw him, as like, oh, I think he's cheating, so you should agree with me on that.
So what was your dynamic with your dad?
I felt like for the longest time, I think I kind of was mad a little bit, especially when he did leave, because I kind of felt like he didn't always have to go. And even when I was in high school, like at one point, she was trying to like forbid me from seeing one of my friends. And like this was shortly after she had kicked me out on my 17th birthday for like some small argument that just like escalated to the worst. And I was like, my dad drove me to my friend's house that day, and I was just like begging him and pleading him, like, can you just like leave her and take me with you? Just like, can we do that? And I felt like I did get angry at him, because I wanted him to understand how much I was suffering. And like, I think he was afraid that if she took it to court, then he would lose like all rights to see us, because she was very convincing. And so like I don't necessarily like, I don't fault him, but I think when I was younger I would get mad at him and kind of be like, well, you weren't there to help me, you know, how dare you? And just kind of like, even as a teen I would say that. Or like, I made sure to never say that I hated him, because I never did hate him. But my dynamic now with my dad is like, he's my best friend. I can't imagine like my life without him, because of how much he's supported me. Like, I understand now the finances and stuff that were going on behind the scenes, that she tried to like, she didn't tell me the truth. She was lying to me about some of the finances. And like, when I was going through puberty and I needed something like bras or something like that, like that's a basic need for a teenage girl. And she would say like, oh, we already got you that. And it's like, well, I'm growing. And she's like, how? Like, oh, you're such a spoiled person. You're such a spoiled girl. Like, we're on the verge of homelessness even. And I remember she had this conversation with me once in the supermarket, so much so that I was like crying in the supermarket as she still continues just like, you know, getting food and groceries, saying like, I barely have enough to feed all of us tonight, and you're complaining about this. And all along, when I was older in high school, I found out that she had been getting cosmetic surgery, so much so that she earned a free session in order to like let me have like a little like facial thing as to like treat me, because It was for like a prom night or something like that.
She racked up
And
points.
so,
Racked up points.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she like, so, and you don't just like get those 3 sessions just going once. Like
Right.
that was over multiple times. And she was like, yeah, I've had Botox and like had work done and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking, like, didn't you say that we were going to be homeless? Like this whole reason why you couldn't get me like new clothes, I had holes in something, or like things just weren't fitting right anymore, or like just doing any of these other alternatives to get me like basic needs. And it was always just like the typical phrases of like, oh, well, I help you and I feed you and you're still not grateful. And I'm just like, well, I'm your kid. So if you don't house me and feed me, like then
It's a
child
problem.
services will come in. So, with my dad, he would, at times when she didn't want to spend the money, she'd be like, go ask your dad, like he's the one that takes care of you. And then at times I would, but I would always like feel guilty because I knew that he was giving money to my mom. So I didn't want him to be spending so much if he already had to support her. And in the meantime, also like buy me things.
Now you
So-
mentioned that your dad was basically like he saved you. So do you want to tell us like how exactly that happened?
Yeah, there was, I guess just like multiple times, like when I was at like a really, really low point, like he just kind of kept me from, just kind of going off the ledge, like metaphorically. And like, I guess, so this kind of gets into like a more like a touchier topic of just like, when I was a teenager, like really young at 11, was when I began this horrible habit of self-harming because I just grew to see myself through my mom's eyes as this like selfish burden almost, as if, when she said, I've done something wrong, I truly believe that I'm the bad person. And it was just kind of like, I had this internal pain, like, crying all the time and just being so depressed that, my escape from that was kind of like hurting myself, because that way it was like, that's my punishment for being a horrible child.
Yeah,
like I felt completely lost at times. And instead of like hurting myself sometimes, if my dad came home early enough, like I remember one time I was like crying in the closet because my mom had said something, and he just like came in and like he didn't even like ask me what had happened. He didn't ask for like any explanation, or like I wasn't afraid. Like he just immediately would just come in and like just hold me. And moments like that of him just like kind of picking up the pieces whenever I felt really broken was just really what kept me going. And another time when he actually did save me from her, she had gotten upset because I made plans for a friend to come pick me up. I was probably about 15 or 16 years old. So my friend had a car and they were coming to pick me up for the weekend. And I thought she had approved me to go. But then she was like, no, I didn't say that. Like, I didn't approve for you to leave. Like, you're not allowed to leave and see your friend. And I kept asking her, like, well, why can't I see my friend? And she was like, oh, she's a bad influence on you. Like, you have to listen to me. I'm your mother. Like, what, you went and asked your dad? And he said yes, and you're not going to listen to me. I'm your mother. And it just escalated to the point where, like, she actually chased me through the house, like, saying, like, I was going to get hit. And so I went into the bathroom and I locked myself, and I heard her like banging on the door, and my dad came home, and like immediately I felt like guilty because I didn't want him to have to come home and immediately see this situation play out, all because I wanted to see my friend. But he like kind of like subdued her enough, and then my grandmother was over at the time, so then she was able to like come into the bathroom and like calm me down enough in time so that way I could go and see my friend. And just kind of like, being able for him to step in and stop the wrath of her at the time was like something that I truly felt safe whenever he was home.
Yeah, I think that's a big subject and everything you've discussed is like feeling safe. That's something that keeps coming up, with kind of those emotions. It's like of an environment where you probably just don't feel safe and don't know what to think, and you're confused and feeling guilty. And a lot of kids go through that. I mean, adults too, but a lot of people go through that, and the self-harm is an outcome of that. And it's great your dad was there to comfort you and support you and love you when you kind of needed it. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially like with college and stuff, because monetarily, like, she didn't support me. And then of course I felt like ashamed to ask my father, because I knew that he wants to also help my sister through college. So it's just kind of like with that in mind and my finances, like even in college, I was living like check to check and like trying to pick up extra hours, just like overexhausting myself at times. If it ever was like a big struggle, like I did feel really privileged in that aspect of like where if I hit rock bottom, I could ask him for money and he would give it to me. But in the same way, I was like, I didn't want to do that because I know that he was also doing that for family members and for other people that have come to him for help and stuff like that. So I already knew that he was helping so many other people, because I think given his background growing up in Ecuador, he grew up very impoverished, and just like he always told me that like he never wanted me to feel hunger the way he did.
Yeah, my
and
dad's
so it
the
was
same
something
way.
that was
As far as like helping, especially helping other family members.
Yeah. In a way, I'm like, don't give away all the money. Like, you need to take care of yourself. Like, I wish you would.
That's
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, that's exactly what he does, is like, he'll fight to the bone for someone, even if he just meets them. If he truly believes that they're like innocent, he'll like help them out as much as possible. And just like, I've always admired that outlook that he's had in life, because he's become such a positive person, even after going through like his own traumas and stuff. Like, he's even told me about like his depression that he felt, like especially growing up as a kid, and then like his like experiencing his mother passing away, and just kind of like, all those struggles. I feel like a lot of people in his position would have just like given up almost, like they wouldn't have even tried. And seeing how like far he's come in life, it's really impressive to see that. And that's something that like, that always keeps me going. Just knowing like, when you hit rock bottom, you can build yourself up to be like the best you can possibly imagine.
Well, that's a great, way to be thinking after everything that you've talked about, to have that point of view. Why don't you talk a little bit about what got you to get that point of view, and how you went from kind of being in that place of feeling kind of lost and scared and not safe to growing up and feeling more secure and safe. What was some of that process like?
I actually did go and see a therapist. And
we're big supporters of that too. Like I don't want to interrupt, but we're big supporters of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like, if you need, like, everyone, even if you're not at rock bottom, I think everyone can benefit from therapy, because you just will have those one-off moments, or those days where you just don't really know how to cope well with that. And I think mine was just like, the anger that I had was like not something, like not even at people, but sometimes at myself, like, oh, I wish I could have done this differently. Like, if I had taken action sooner or something, maybe my life could have turned out differently, or things could have been a little bit easier. Because I am happy where I'm at my life right now. But yeah, just kind of talking to it with the therapist and laying everything out, and just recognizing, like, I think saying that I was abused as a child was something that I felt almost afraid to say, in case if like it ever got back around to my mom. But now I fully like recognize it, like, yeah, that was child abuse. Like, I was hit multiple times, and I was threatened, like, not once or twice, but like multiple times throughout my life, just like constantly living in fear. Like, you don't instill fear in a child based off of nothing. A child is just afraid of you over nothing. Like, something has happened for them to have that fear.
And especially
And
like hiding, like when you're in your house, like not even being comfortable in your own
yeah,
home. It's, I mean, that's
Yeah.
just, it's severe when it gets to that point. Like you're like hiding in the closet just to prevent anything from like just sparking up and then, you know, her losing it on you.
That's true. And
Yeah.
and like you said, you were afraid to say that you were abused. I think a lot of people are always scared and afraid to say that truth, but because it makes it real. When you say it, it becomes way more real, but that's when really a lot of that growth
And
can
the
happen.
healing can start.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was just like, I don't know, just like that sudden realization of like, oh, I was abused. Like that was a form of abuse. Like that was what happened to me isn't how it's normally supposed to go when you're growing up. And that's the time when you're supposed to be, you know, looking to your future and like really looking forward to these monumental moments in life of becoming an adult, and having that support system by your side is really crucial in those years. And just like realizing that, hey, it has been a bit more difficult because you didn't necessarily have that, and coming to terms with like, I guess being forgiving has been a big step that my therapist also talked about, was like forgiving my mom, even though like I would never say to her face like, you abused me, because I know she won't. It will just create a further rift between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've said something that was almost borderline, like saying like, you abused me, and like she just immediately started crying, and I felt really bad about it, and I just didn't want to have to go through. I guess I didn't want to go through that feeling. I didn't want to be the one to cause her pain. I just want her to know that I think she knows what she's done.
She probably knows.
And I just want her, I just want her to know now that like I'm here to support her. And in a way, it's kind of shifted in that when she took care of my brother more, like I've talked to my brother a lot about it, because he was there for all of it. And he even said like, he's like, yeah, like she put you through the ringer, more so than me. And I got away with like a lot. Like he even emphasizes like, I got away with a lot. Like he could sneak out and stuff and not get in trouble. And like, I think he's kind of angry at her for that, unfortunately. And I feel like he's not talking to her as much now as he used to. So in a way, it's kind of like, in terms of her kids that are adults now, she sort of had really like relied on me still as like a confidant for if she's like upset about something or wants to just talk, or if she's feeling lonely, like she'll come to me. And I've made my peace with everything, and I've just kind of taken on this role of like, I just want to be able to give other people support, because I wasn't given that support, and things could have been so much better had I just had that support. So I always just want to be like there to give people support, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we can both relate to that. And something that's something that I think every single person that we've talked to so far that's gone through something they've all pretty much said a similar statement, that they just want to be able to help or inspire or encourage other people that have gone through similar things. And one thing that you said that's really awesome about forgiveness is like, the great thing about forgiveness is you don't necessarily have to talk to that person to forgive them. You can just do it inside of yourself to forgive whoever that person is for whatever they did. It's just not holding that resentment, not secretly being mad and being angry and holding it against them. You can just kind of free yourself and forgive and just do it internally in yourself.
Yeah, because like that resentment, just if you just hold on to it, like it comes out in many different ways. Like in my past, and it didn't allow me, like for example, trust and abandonment issues, and it made it very difficult for Tim and I's relationship and many of my relationships that I tried to have. It's because I never like there was like that problem, it's like that the abandonment, it's like not being able to trust you and expecting you to leave, like knowing it's like you're gonna leave me because that's what everybody else does, and I even told you once that when we were Tim and I were actually trying to understand, and going from interdependent to, no, I'm sorry,
independence to interdependence.
Yep.
Right.
And one of the things I told you was that if my own mom didn't stay, like all those times that she just left us or dropped us off to my grandmother's house and all that stuff. And so it's like, if she was able to do that with no problem, it's like, why wouldn't you?
Right. If she left me, of course you will too.
Yeah. It's like, why would you stay? Like, you're not my family. But
because I'm me.
Yeah.
And everybody's different. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing is, like, when my mom, I think there was one phrase that she said was like, she looked at me crying once and she was like, where did I go wrong? Like, looking at me, like, if my own mother can reject me, like, what's stopping someone that I'm dating to just one day reject me?
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely had that feeling. And I've, like, my current boyfriend now, like, I even talked to him about it and saying, like, hey, like, if I'm freaking out a lot about the situation, it's not because, like, you've done something. It's because in the past, unfortunately, I've been in these situations where I'm supposed to be close with someone that is even my own, like, blood relation. And even then I got hurt so bad. Like, that was probably, like, one of the worst things that has ever been, like, said to me. It was like, where did I go wrong? I thought it was like, this complete mistake in life. And just, like, that's a lot to, it's a lot to put on someone else. So definitely, like, dealing with that yourself is something that you have to do. And at the same time, like, finding a person that is able to, like, understand that, hey, you are coming from a dark place and I want to help you get better. I want to help you better yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that statement could even be more about her talking to herself than you. That statement could be her own problems and things and issues and her own guilt on herself, feeling that it's not so much of, oh, you're this, loser and you never made it or whatever. It could be that she feels she failed you. It could be her own guilt, and it could not have anything to do with you so much as her feeling like, oh my God, I failed. Her just internally thinking like, I should have done more. Or, you never know.
I think she did feel out in that way, but I know that, like, I guess given the scenario and the situation, because we were arguing and I like said something, and then it just, like, she said it to, she did want there to be, like, me to feel, like, the gravity of what she was feeling, I guess.
She was trying to put you down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but I do think, like, in a way, like, when you say it that way, like, when I try and, like, because this was probably, like, my early teens when she had said that, and just, it's hard to, like, also, I feel like my memory has been, like, somewhat blocked out, because you try and, like, block out the trauma, so just trying to, like, remember all these things that have happened, just trying to remember, like, her exact face at the time and her meaning and everything. Like, you could be right about, like, a portion of her probably felt in that way. And I feel like even now, like, I don't call her as often as, like, some of my other friends who are close with their moms, and they're like, oh, I can't go a day without calling my mom. And I think secretly my mom wants that, but, I'm still healing myself because of interactions that we had growing up. And just, I think that's definitely a regret that she has, even though she hasn't explicitly stated it. I think she does feel, like, somewhat alone, especially if my brother's not calling her as often. And I am trying to, like, call her more, but I also am just trying to, like, focus on what I need. Yeah,
healthy boundaries, doing things at your own pace, and that's really important. What you said is you got to take care of you. No relationship can grow or get better without one of the individuals taking care of themselves first. That happened with me and Yvette big time. We both weren't healthy, and our relationship was crap, obviously. So we needed to kind of take a step back, work on ourselves individually, then come together and work on a relationship. And that's just any dynamic. It can be, siblings, parents, anybody. Yeah. So it is, you got to work on yourself first. That's the most important thing.
And so from what you said also, so obviously you are getting help, and that's exactly it. Like, when you tell your boyfriend, like, hey, you know, kind of letting him know, like, hey, if I react this way, it's because of this. It's like a lot of people don't do that.
Right.
And they should, because, I mean,
where
communication.
is this feeling coming from?
Yes.
Am I really angry at the words you're saying?
Or
am
it
I
just
angry because of something that triggered me to feel a certain type of way because I was treated a certain type of way in a different time?
Right. It's like not a lot of people, like, unless you actually work on yourself and start to, you know, kind of dig all these things up, and it's like, oh, well, that's why, and this is why. So, I mean, I think it's fantastic.
It's awesome.
And the fact that your boyfriend, like, he is supportive, and I mean, I haven't met him personally, but, you know, I see your Instagram and he looks like a sweetheart, and you look really happy, and that's kind of like, and it shows, like, you do look happy, and I'm glad that you've gotten to the point that, you know, I'm sure, like, things, you know, there's still more healing that needs to be done, but the fact that you've already gotten to, like, closer to that is, it's, I mean, that's kind of the important part.
Yeah. And it honestly, like, it wasn't, I feel like I made it sound easier than it was, but it took a while for me to, like, I guess I did seek out therapy, but then I would kind of, like, deviate away from that. And of course, like, in college, I did resort to drinking at times, like, when I wasn't feeling the best, to try and, like, make myself feel better. And I got into, like, habitual drinking sometimes.
Yeah, and that's completely understandable in that situation. That's, you know, alcohol is probably one of the easiest, most effective, most socially accepted forms of medicating yourself for when you do feel alone, not good enough, all those things. It's socially acceptable. In college, everybody's binge drinking. You're almost you're almost not cool if you're not. So that's tough. That's totally understandable.
Yeah.
You know,
it's definitely, like, a tough hill to climb, but it's worth making it to the top. Because, like, that was always, like, kind of my motto. And thinking, like, it could be really rough right now with us just because we're down. We're at our low point. And that just means we just go up from here, you know? And yeah, that probably took, like, I think it wasn't until probably my junior year in college when I finally was like, you know what, like, the drinking and stuff and this whole scene is, like, it's always just a temporary fix. You know, it's never the lasting healing answer. If it was, then everyone would be drinking. So, but, yeah, no, that's when I, like, started. I actually had to go to, like, a different therapist, and then that was, like, I took that one more seriously, I think.
And that's a big part of it. Like, you're only going to get out of therapy what you put into it. If you go in and do it half-assed, don't tell the truth, you're not honest, you're not vulnerable, what the hell do you think you're going to get out of it? Really, it's just like anything. The more work you put into it, the better the results you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm still in therapy now, and I take, like, monthly sessions, like, once a month, and that seems to be doing really well. And I've actually started involving my boyfriend in that, just that way he has, like, a better understanding. So I think that's one thing that, like, with relationships and you're dealing with all those past traumas, it's, like, really hard to, you know, see this person as, like, an individual rather than, like, something that you have to rely on. You know, like, it's really easy to latch on to something that is, like, almost fills the void, especially if you haven't had that parental figure, that sort of support. Like, a lot of people will look for that in other people. And just, like, trying to make sure that, you know, you're dating this person because you really care about them and they actually fit certain values that you want in a partner, not just because, oh, someone's here and that way I'm not alone. You know, just kind of really learning to distinguish between the two. So that's why I do like sharing, like, my therapy experience with my boyfriend, because I just want to show him, like, this is where I'm coming from, and I want you to see my growth, so that way, like, you further understand me as a person, but also see me growing and not just having to, like I don't rely on him so much now. I mean, I rely on him to, like, you know, it's just, like, the basics of, like, hey, if I have someone to talk to, that would be great. But, like, I'm not fully, like, you know, dependent on him. And I think that's one key to, like, a healthy relationship, is just, like, working, like you said before, like, working on yourself, so that way you guys can both be, like, the best you can be together.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Right. You can't rely on someone else for your own happiness.
Yeah.
That's one thing that, you know, we've even discussed that. That's, yep, you got to work on
Yeah,
yourself.
I can't, and you know, that's just I can't expect you to make me happy.
Right.
I have to kind of make myself happy, and then we could come together. So, but yeah, that was a great story, and I mean, I really appreciate you, you know, reaching out and being ready to actually talk about it, you know, and let.
I do feel lighter now, like after like explaining this, and especially like because you and I are close, and like just kind of having this insight into our lives now, like it does feel like I do feel a lighter weight on my shoulders to be able to talk about it now. And I just want to say thank you both for having this platform for me to do this. That's like it's really amazing. And I love what you're doing. Like I immediately subscribed right away, and just wow. Thank you so much.
Well, we appreciate it. We definitely appreciate you, you know, being honest and being vulnerable and being open. And I'm sure it will help, you know, and not just somebody, it'll help people. Yeah. It'll help.
Yeah.
But all right. I mean, this is great. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Take care.
All right.
All right. Bye.
You too. Bye.